I just came from watching Netflix's recent movie, which is very popular right now. It's called Leave the World Behind. As soon as it said produced by Michelle and Barack Obama, everyone was like, we gotta see this, right? And I couldn't help but notice that a lot of elements from this movie are similar to an episode from The Twilight Zone. The Twilight Zone, the modernish remake from 2002, not the older one, the black and white one. And in this video, I just wanted to point out those similarities so that you can tell me, do you think that Leave the World Behind was taken from this episode of The Twilight Zone? So the episode begins with members of a neighborhood discussing about plans for Thanksgiving, which is a holiday, basically holiday plans.
Okay, so holiday decorations up after Thanksgiving and down on the 6th of January. Great.
Just like in Leave the World Behind, the main characters are going on vacation. So that's the first similarity. And then the second similarity is that there is a kid in the Twilight Zone episode who's stuck to their screen like an iPad type device, of which even in Leave the World Behind, there's a kid who is like on the screen all the time. In Leave the World Behind, there's a sort of like blackout, like a sort of media blackout. And in the Twilight Zone episode, there is a literal blackout. Where the lights go out. I don't think in Leave the World Behind the lights went out, but there's a sort of like media blackout where people couldn't communicate with each other. And just like the Twilight episode, the cell phones stop working.
The phones aren't working, Clay. How is that supposed to make a difference?
I think the internet is down anyway, so...
Okay, look.
Hey! My game died!
So even in Leave the World Behind, I believe the cell phones weren't working, right? The cell phones were not working. And then this is the funny part. There's a part where the dialogue is kind of the same. There is a part where in the Twilight episode, someone talks about a sonic boom.
Was that an earthquake?
No, sonic boom.
And also in Leave the World Behind, there's someone who talked about a sonic boom.
Was it a plane breaking the sound barrier or whatever that? A sonic boom. Was that a sonic boom?
So yeah, the dialogue there was also kind of the same-ish, yeah, suspicious. And then also another similarity is that in both movies there is a rational black guy. There's a black guy who's very rational, and then there's an irrational person who is white. Let me just say it like that. There's also a reference to aliens in the Twilight Zone.
Independence Day, the movie with Will Smith. Aliens invade the world and blow everything up.
Can it, Jason?
I don't know if in Leave the World Behind if there's a reference to aliens, but I think there was an idea of that aliens were causing the whole thing. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it was said in the movie, or maybe I researched it, I don't know. But there's a reference to aliens in the Twilight Zone episode. And then also in the Twilight Zone episode, there was chatter about terrorist networks.
He's overseas. He says there's been chatter on the terrorist network.
That has to be what they were chattering about.
Yeah, another similarity to Leave the World Behind. The next similarity is that in the Twilight Zone episode, there was references to a sailing boat.
There's the reservoir.
That's right. You see, it's not just for sailing your fancy boat on. That's the water supply for the whole county.
Of which, if you've watched Leave the World Behind, there was also an oil tanker that comes to the beach. In the Twilight Zone episode, there's references to cars with computer chips.
All our cars have computer chips in them.
That would explain why my son's game thing stopped working and the cell phones.
And as you know, if you've watched Leave the World Behind, there's a scene that involves Teslas, which are basically cars with, computer driving, whatever. And there's this part where this one character says, there's nothing on the radio but dead air.
Now our cars aren't working, our phones aren't working, and there's nothing on the radio but dead air. And what about the explosion?
Which also reminds me of Leave the World Behind, where basically when they switched on the TVs, they were like dead. There's also a part in the Twilight Zone episode where someone says, we are friends.
We are friends. But what about them?
And just like Leave the World Behind, Friends was a very popular reference in the movie, so...
Danny, come on now, it's me. We know each other. We're friends.
You tell me, up to this point, with all these similarities, do you think that this episode of The Twilight Zone, is that where Leave the World Behind was derived from? We also have, in the Twilight Zone episode, strangers approaching a house to ask other strangers about what's happening. And then in Leave the World Behind, there was a suspicious guy who knew about the attack. And also in the Twilight Zone episode, there is a suspicious guy who knew about the attack.
They've got power. And a car.
But he came back for his family because he knew it was going to happen.
In Leave the World Behind, there was a disrespectful white lady who was not very trusting of, other characters. And also in the Twilight Zone episode, there was a distrustful lady who did not trust the neighbors.
Their house could be a beacon to show the terrorists where to bomb. If they're after the reservoir,
Well, then they'd die with us.
but that's what terrorists do.
Another similarity, the child character in the Twilight Zone notices something suspicious.
Hey, Dad,
What?
come here, look.
It's a spy camera on my house.
While also in Leave the World Behind, there is a child character that notices all of the suspicious things that are happening. She's the first one to notice. Just like in the Twilight Zone episode, the child character is the first one to notice.
Look at that boat.
In this episode, we also have people turning on each other. Basically, because I think that Leave the World Behind is a story about how people come together and how they turn on each other in times of crisis. That's one of the many meanings it has. Even this episode of The Twilight Zone is exactly like that. And then at the end of the Twilight Zone episode, you basically see that the whole thing was an experiment by the government to see, and I'm quoting, this one soldier says, in the event of a perceived terrorist attack, isolated communities will take this long to crumble.
In the event of a perceived terrorist attack, isolated communities will sustain themselves for 5 hours.
Also, there's the character of GH in Leave the World Behind. He also talks about isolated communities and isolating people.
First stage was isolation. Disable their communication and transportation.
Those are nearly about 20 similarities between these two pieces of media. One is a Twilight Zone episode, one is a movie. Please tell me what you think. I found the similarities to be way too many. Is one derived exactly from the other? Is the plot stolen? Is it influenced? What do you think? Comment below and tell me. I just thought I should point it out because I haven't seen anyone online talking about it. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to smash like and subscribe. Tell me what you think of it. This episode is called The Monsters Are on Maple Street. It should be on YouTube. I think I'll leave the link in the description section because I watched it on YouTube. Tell me what you thought and then I'll see you in the next one.